Hey everybody, it's your boy, Baseman Awakens, checking in with you for the latest video on the Baseman Awakens YouTube channel. Now, before I get into the topic, what Black Lives Matter can learn from the Yellow Vest movement, I just want to do a little bit of house cleaning to remind everyone that every Sunday is when I drop new content on the Baseman Awakens YouTube channel. So just remember, come over here, or more importantly, subscribe, then check the notification button, and then every Sunday you'll see a new video from me, Baseman Awakens. All right, so let's get into the video. So, for the last month or so, there's been a large and well organized protest movement that's been going on in the country of France, known as the Yellow Vest movement. Why are they called the Yellow Vest? Because apparently France has this crazy law that if you work in certain blue collar occupations, such as a truck driver, that you're required to own and wear a yellow vest when you're working. So, because of a number of tax increases, specifically an 18% increase on fuel tax and also tax cuts for the rich, the French people, the working class and middle class, are saying, we're not having this anymore. And they've launched this grassroots movement that's had a pretty heavy impact on the French government, where the French president, Macron, I think that's his name, has agreed to actually rescind the 18% increase. And then he's also talking about doing other concessions to basically make the economic conditions for the average French person better. But these yellow vest people, I gotta say, man, they know how to use protests to have an impact, because that's just what the first level of the impact of the Yellow Vest movement. Now the Yellow Vest people are talking about doing a bank run on Saturday, January 12th. And for those of you who are not familiar with what a bank run is, it's basically when all at once, all the people who bank at a specific bank go there and ask for their money. And honestly, I'm extremely impressed with these Yellow Vest people, because they're using their numbers to have an economic impact. They've essentially shut down France in the last month or so, where the tourism has come to an end. In some of these cities, you literally cannot conduct any business at all because they got it on lock. And it makes me think about the lessons that Black people can learn from these Yellow Vest people. Now, granted, France is a white country and most of these protesters are white and we are Black, and we know how government and force deals with us differently. But I still think there are lessons to be learned. And I'm doing this video to compare and contrast how Black people have used to protest and get things done to how we protest now, particularly through the Black Lives Matter movement, and the lessons that we can learn from these Yellow Vest people, right? So, particularly during the 50s and 60s, Black people utilized protests to affect economic and political change, which is something we're not doing anymore. Let me explain. Martin Luther King, perfect example. He's looked at as the Black man that was able to basically end segregation in this country, whether it be Jim Crow in the South or its nicer, friendlier version in the North and the West, which was still extremely oppressive. And the key to Martin Luther King being successful was him understanding how to use numbers to affect white people's pockets. Let's take a look at the Montgomery bus boycott. What did it achieve? Martin Luther King, through his leadership, got Black people on code. All the Black people agreed to not ride the public transportation system. Why? Because they were racist, they forced Black people to sit in the back, and they forced Black people to pay more money. What did he do? He organized the Black community in Montgomery, and they all agreed to not utilize the public transportation system. They utilized their numbers. Black people were the majority of the riders. What did that do? It almost drove the public transportation system to be broke. Martin Luther King understood the key in using Black numbers to affect economic and political change. They changed their policies. Black people were charged the same amount of money as whites. Black people were allowed to sit anywhere on the bus. And Martin Luther King, even though we're always told, he was the guy that talked about everybody hugging and loving each other, that's what he utilized throughout his short career. He talked about the need for integration. He talked about the need for love, but he always utilized the black masses to effect economic change. And a lot of people forget that the reason why he was assassinated is because he was actually organizing the poor people's movement. The poor people's movement, which was not just about black people, but specifically when it came to black people, it was about helping black men, particularly in lower blue collar positions, to get equal pay, benefits, and pensions and those type of things. And people forget when he was in Memphis and he was giving his speech to that mostly black crowd, most of those were black men who were actually, I believe that they were garbage men who were fighting for equal rights in terms of their pay and benefits, and they held signs saying, "I am a man." It was because of that Martin Luther King again pushed and who wanted to push this movement out on a national level, and also his criticisms of the Vietnam War, which could have impacted the number of black men going into the military. That's the reason why they got rid of them. But compare and contrast to where black people are now, right? Our primary, in my opinion, particularly among the young people, our primary means of protest now are through organizations that are affiliated with the Black Lives Matter movement. Personally, I'm not impressed by Black Lives Matters. I think that the sad thing is that black people, when we protest now, it's just turned into a whole bunch of emotionalism in which we beg white people to solve our problems for us, but then we forget about the important link to that, which is how do we impact the system economically? For example, there's been a number of mass, highly publicized police shootings of unarmed black men, women, and children. Take a look what happened in Ferguson. Take a look at what happens in New York City on a regular basis. What is our response? Our black leaders, I don't know who made them our leaders, but our black leaders come out, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, even though nobody listens to those guys nowadays, it's really more the Black Lives Matter people such as Shaun King and that dude D-Ray and these other types of people who come out, do the press conference, who lead the march, and guess what they end up doing at the end? They end up benefiting. They use these movements as a means for them to springboard themselves into political office, such as D-Ray, who ran for the mayor of Baltimore. They use the black masses as a means to scare white people or the establishment into giving them resources, getting them money, giving them recognition. But at the end of the day, those black masses are never used to affect real pressure on the system like our ancestors in the 50s and 60s actually did. And I think that's the reason why you compare the Black Lives Matter protests, which have been going on, we're in 2019, they've been going on for nearly 10 years, to the yellow vests, and you can easily see the impacts and the outcomes. Yellow vests have been around for less than a month. They've already gotten concessions from the French government. If they go through with the bank run, Macron, the French president, is going to be forced to step down. Why? Because utilizing their numbers to hurt the pockets of the elite. What does Black Lives Matter do? Are we doing that? Was that done in Ferguson where black people are like 80% of the population? No. Was that done in New York City where black people are 30% of the population? No. And that's what I'm talking about. Like Black Lives Matter and all these other black organizations that lead and organize these protests, they're in it for themselves. It's almost like it's scripted, right? Let's think about it. Like, there's this guy, there's a black attorney. His name is Benjamin Crump, and he got national spotlight, or he found himself getting into the national spotlight because of the shooting of that young black teenager, and I'm forgetting his name, and I know that's bad, by George Zimmerman, possibly 5 or 6 years ago. And ever since then, anytime there's been a question of police shooting of an unarmed black male or young child, guess who the family all of a sudden wants to have working with them? Benjamin Crump. Is he the best black civil rights attorney out there? No. But it speaks to what I'm saying, where it's almost become like a script and everybody knows their place. Al Sharpton or Black Lives Matter comes in. We bring in Benjamin Crump. They do a press conference with the grieving family. They organize a march. They sue the city or the organization or whatever else. They might get a little payout here and there. But at the end of the day, the system just keeps going on. It's just like a cost of business, as opposed to what these yellow vest people have been doing, where they've been getting concessions and making some changes. But the thing is, we do live in a matrix, guys. So I do want to talk about how the matrix operates, which is the elites typically always control both sides, both parties, in most cases, and how they utilize what's known as the Hegelian dialect, which is problem, reaction, solution. So the elites will create a problem and then also create the reaction, which is like the protest movement or the riot or whatever else, and then offer the solution. And the solution is key because the solution is typically what the elites wanted in the first place. If you take a look at, like, in terms of France, they've been having more and more police powers, and they've been taking away the civil rights away from their people. The same thing in the United States. That's been done under the guise of terrorism. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but what I'm saying is, even taking a look at the Yellow Vest movement and Black Lives Matter and all these other protest movements, we always have to have our logical thinking hat on. So ultimately, what will the Yellow Vest movement achieve? I don't know. I think if the bank runs happen, Macron, the French president, is going to have to step down. But we got to ask ourselves this question. What was that the ultimate plan in the first place? Was Macron an obstacle to the elites' goal of achieving something? The same thing with Black Lives Matter. I talk about how these so-called black leaders, you take a look at D-Ray, who's the leader of Black Lives Matter. As soon as he got national recognition, what did he decide to do? Oh, he decided to run for the mayor of Baltimore, which he ultimately lost. But what I'm saying is, even though protest movements can and have achieved a lot of great things, particularly during the 50s and 60s for black people, we also have to be very, very discerning in terms of who organized these protest movements, such as Black Lives Matter, which is primarily funded by George Soros and the Rockefeller Foundation. These rich white people, of course, because they care about black people, and ultimately what they achieve. Now, it might sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm not. Black people, Black Lives Matter, we can learn a lot from the Yellow Vest movement. They've been able to get concessions from the French government, and this bank run is going to ultimately bring down that French president, which is something that I think a lesson that we can draw in terms of always utilizing our numbers to affect the system economically. But within that, we always have to question, when a new movement comes along, who's funding it? Who are these leaders? Who appointed them as leaders? And then decide if it's something that we want to be a part of. Guys, these are my thoughts on the lessons that the Black Lives Matter movement can learn from the Yellow Vest. Comment, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you agree or disagree. And of course, I'll respond to you. And as I said, every Sunday is when I drop new content. Like, share, and subscribe. Baseman Awakens out.